publicly. Ooh. Okay, I think that is it. We are broadcasting. So I don't have much to share this week, but I know that Gabe has been doing a lot during these last 2 weeks. Is that true, Gabe?
Yeah, I basically got back from vacation and got back on a project where we're actually using the JSON API module, so had lots of time to work on it. We'll see if that continues. Hopefully it will. Yeah, so I guess some of the stuff I've been working on, just cleaning up the issue queues, helping out with some of the filter and kind of conditions and things like that, the requests around that. Another thing were the image styles and trying to think about how to use that. And I know we didn't really come to a conclusion, but maybe we could talk about that briefly in here. And then also, I know that you wanted to talk a little bit about some better documentation around the filtering syntax and putting something together for that. Does that all sound about right?
That sounds about right. You choose the order of the topics.
Sorry?
You choose what you want to talk about first.
Okay. I guess the first one is the filter syntax. You sent me a couple examples of things that you had put together before, and I know you were thinking about possibly making it into an extension at some point. I agree with you. I think doing it right off the bat is probably the wrong way to go about it. But I would like to put together better documentation. I think the issue that we have right now has a lot of good stuff, but it's impossible to find.
Yeah, and I've tried because we were putting a non-Drupal JSON API server together for a project that I'm involved with, and I said, hey, we developed a filter syntax that should be covering most of the use cases that we have, like having multiple ors, ands, groups, and then the exists, etc. And we should be reusing the same effort instead of defining a new syntax or a new filter strategy, and that way we can cross pollinize. And the thing is that I sent some people to that issue, and they couldn't make anything of it. Like there were no examples that were kind of understandable. Everything was too theoretical, I guess. So I think it would be a good thing to just expose what we are doing in an understandable way, and then define that as an extension. Like here, so Drupal is conforming to the JSON API spec, plus this filtering stuff, plus whatever things that we decide they should be kind of forming the JSON API Drupal spec, like when you put all those extensions together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Hopefully, I think I'll try and get like a draft out today. I liked your idea of using a GitHub gist, but maybe it might be useful to put together like a documentation page using like GitHub Pages or something, and we just use that for all JSON API documentation.
There's a book in Drupal.org.
Oh, really?
I mean, there is the documentation book. I mean, like the generic one with a gazillion pages. We could just start one, maybe a sibling of the REST, the core REST module. It should be something set up there.
Okay.
So we just add the page in there, and hopefully will be findable.
Okay. Have we put anything in there yet so far? No, this just links to the YouTube playlist.
We haven't put anything in the. I don't mean the project page. I mean the community docs.
Okay.
Oh, they changed the. Sexy. They changed the UI for that. Uh, I guess that it would be under extending Drupal, and then, well, there is a whole tree, and we need to find the perfect place to put our page, I guess, for JSON API. Do you have any thoughts about that, Daniel? Do you have any place that you would put this?
Not really. I mean, there's probably a good place, but
Right. Yeah. I guess that somewhere nested in a deep level under that.
I mean, having it as a first child of West seems sensible. I mean, isn't like the old documentation migrated over to that new documentation page or so? So,
I guess.
I mean, there is this page. Where's the Hangout chat thingy there? So that's still on the old bit. So yeah, I'm not sure whether that's the right page actually, but.
Oh, yeah, I see. Yeah, so somewhere there, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not really extending Drupal, right? Or working with some API.
Yeah, that's true.
But maybe we should create a new West handbook page and then put West JSON API below it. I mean, because then we could also link to other stuff, right? Like, I don't know, the specification of West or something.
Right. So okay. I know what you mean. It seems that if you go one level up, like developing API 8, there is RESTful Web Services API, kind of links directly to the RESTful Web Services module, which kind of makes sense. Maybe you're right. Maybe we should just ask a wrapper around that page, and give ourselves some room to put a link for services, or I don't know. I don't know if that is the place. Wim wrote this. Maybe we could ask him. It seems that Wim wrote this documentation page. So, okay, can you ping Wim, Gabe? Okay.
I can do that.
Oh, perfect. Cool. So I guess that to me it makes sense, since it seems that I don't know, there may be some interest in putting this into core someday. That's why this is the only, well, one of the few modules that I maintain that I'm using the Drupal issue queue. I usually, oh. Sorry, Wim was pinging me about joining the call, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, instead of doing it in GitHub, I decided to go with the Drupal issue queue just because of that. So it makes sense, I guess, to put the documentation as well in Drupal.org. Oh, look at that. We got a question for you just right away.
Okay.
So we were wondering, because we kind of want to add some better docs, and Gabe is going to be working on that, and we were wondering what's the best place to put that. And it seems that you have a ton of edits in documentation, especially in REST and all that stuff, so you're the guy.
Yeah, I just saw Daniel ping me with the exact same question, so thanks, Daniel. So the documentation I've been writing is mostly for, or is entirely for Drupal core. If JSON API ends up in Drupal core, then I think it can live under the same namespace. So it's for REST, it's at Drupal.org/developing/API/8 because it's a Drupal 8 API/REST because it's the REST API for Drupal 8. So when JSON API becomes part of Drupal core as an experimental module, I think it can live at the same URL, but then instead of REST, called JSON API. That makes perfect sense to me. As long as it's in contrib, it probably needs a different URL alias. But that doesn't really matter because you can just change URL aliases afterwards, and then it will automatically redirect anybody who was using the old Drupal 8 contrib link and point it to the core link, if you know what I mean. So if it's, let's say, contrib 8 JSON API, and then you change it later on to be part of the Drupal 8 core API documentation, then that will just work fine. But I don't have a firm opinion on where Drupal 8 contrib API documentation lives in Drupal.org. I think that is sort of a wild west, so we may need to figure it out.
Yeah, from my point of view, it would be kind of nice to have some kind of REST overview page or
Sure.
HTTP APIs overview page where both the core stuff and potential contrib stuff
right. Yeah, that makes
maybe
sense.
Also specifications and I don't know, videos on YouTube and stuff.
Right. Yeah, we have this page, CK editor documentation for the contrib modules. Anna Colada started that page actually, and she provides an overview of contrib modules extending CK editor in Drupal 8, and then also kind of generic documentation. So it gives you an overview of the ecosystem, if you will. And I think what you're describing is much along those lines.
Right. So and we actually have that, right?
Right. Yes. So maybe we want exactly the link you just pasted, but then with /contrib to provide an overview of the REST ecosystem in contrib. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so basically a sibling from there. No, a child page from there.
Yeah, a child page. So basically this. It doesn't exist right now, but okay.
Cool. +1. So I guess that the next issue is maybe image derivatives or image styles.
Yeah, that's a hard one, for sure. The only thing I was thinking is that we both kind of mentioned in passing in the issue queue something kind of relative to having a relationship relative to the image entity. I don't know, I'll send a link where I quoted us both. Whoops, wrong one.
Yeah.
It kind of makes sense that there may be some relationship to a file object whose attributes represented different possible image styles, something like that. It feels a little wonky, but I do want to have some support for it. I mean, it's in Drupal core. It's absolutely, like, I think anybody doing front-end work is going to be hard-pressed to just be creating image downloads off of the single link that we're now providing. And if that image URL or image style isn't provided, there's no easy way to get to it.
So I'm not familiar with this particular issue, but it sounds like given a certain file, you want to be able to easily get all of the possible image style URLs for that particular image. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah.
And you're saying that it would be interesting or valuable if when accessing, I guess, getting the image style configuration entity, that somehow provides you with all the necessary information to be able to apply, to be able to turn any stored file, any uploaded file in Drupal, given such a file URL, transform it to a valid image style URL. Is that what you're saying?
No.
Okay.
More that if you were to, say, access an image field on a node, that node, or if you were to include the image file entity, then that file entity might have a relationship to something that provided you with the image style URLs pre-generated with an iToken.
So I'm torn with a couple of solutions, but at the end of it, I feel that image styles is the perfect example of server and presentation coupling, right?
Yes.
And I don't know if we are mature enough to be tackling that just yet. I would say that that is a perfectly valid approach, and if I had to do it for a project, that's probably the way that I would do it, like create an entity full of computed fields that are not stored, and every field is, every field name is contains somehow information about the image style that generated it, so you can intelligently do an include, but instead of getting every possible image style, just get the image style that you need. So it still retains it's only slightly coupled, right? Because the front end can request the image style that better suits them. And
How can I request that?
when you do an include, you can say, hey, for this included entity, because if we create this relationship as an entity with a list of computed fields, you can then say, for this computed entity, just give me these fields. This is something that we are already doing, and if somehow the field name contained that information, that could be something that we could do. And we have to do this with encoding the information in the field name, with this very lame, because JSON API doesn't provide control data on the attributes.
So you are saying that by default, so basically you are in JSON API providing sort of computed fields, one for every image style. So basically image field name, and then maybe an underscore, and then the suffix, which is then the image style name. And if you request those as one of the included fields for the JSON API request, then the response will provide that particular image style URL.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Because I agree, it's pretty lame, but I also don't see how you can do it better unless you are going to provide every single image style URL, which I guess you could as well, but I'm not sure how that would look like and whether that would be acceptable.
Right, and to be honest, I feel that this is this should be in the links section for the image entity, but there is no way to limit the payload of the links section using JSON API unless we define a non-obvious extension that defines exactly how you would be limiting the number of links that you output every time that you select an image. So
why would it need to be limited?
Because you don't want to have a bloated payload.
Okay. So the thing I was thinking while Gabe was explaining what he intended to do is, and that gets back to what you were saying about coupling server presentation to what the server is returning. One model can be that you set up a certain image style for a certain image field, and then the response, JSON API or otherwise, contains that image style URL. And that's valid. But another approach can be that you want the client to be able to choose which image style is used, and you don't want to have to update the server and deal with Drupal concepts like entity displays and whatnot to configure. So basically, you don't want, as a client, as a front-end developer, to configure the Drupal site to use a certain image style URL, maybe even because you want to select a different one based on some dynamic condition, and you don't want to configure Drupal to match that in some way. And that, I think, it's that distinction, or that ability to choose different ways of dealing with this, that makes it very difficult for us to provide a solution, because there can be multiple approaches, right?
Yeah, and that's why I'm leaning towards, deferring this to whatever, maybe a different country, maybe just dealing with it as a custom, just recommending just deal with it, since there are so many approaches. Just deal with it as a custom module, or maybe not. Maybe we could just provide a different contrib. But since it's not gonna meet every requirement, because this is like a gray area, I would say just leave it out of the current JSON API module.
I'm fine with that. I think one thing that would be neat to approach, and one thing that makes me feel a little bit better about including it, even though it is kind of some presentational logic, is that when you think about the image style URL, right, in HTTP semantics, every resource is a unique resource at some path, right? And so providing a link to an image style reference isn't necessarily kind of providing any presentational logic on the server side, as long as we present a menu of choices to choose from, right? If we say this image has a reference to 3 other resources, and some reference about what those resources are in that link, like it's 300 pixels by 400 pixels, that provides some additional data about what that resource is once you actually access it. But we're not deciding up front, like as Wim was saying, deciding what image style to present, right? Which link to show. That I don't feel comfortable with, but presenting some relationship to an entity which provides a menu of choices might be a little bit different. I think
that sounds great, actually, but it sounds like Matteo is concerned about providing too many link headers.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that, Gabe?
I guess the thing was that I was thinking of some sort of like intermediate entity or object, so that the image entity would link to a file object entity, and that thing could be included or not included. So if you were just trying to get the image entity information, you could exclude that relationship and you never worry about it. But if you specifically wanted to go get that file object and include the links to it, that would be some way to limit the size of the workflow.
That's very interesting, and I wonder what Daniel and Matteo think about it for one particular reason, which is what you just described, Gabe, makes a ton of sense to me conceptually. Curious what they think about that. But the Drupal-specific tricky thing here is that file entities do not have canonical URLs in the same sense as everything else. Their canonical URL actually does refer directly to the file URL by which you can download the file. So there is no URL that identifies the file entity in Drupal. So currently, it would be very difficult to provide that intermediary that you described. So I wonder what they think about that.
Yeah, well, I don't want to repeat myself too much. I think that hypermedia should be the way to go. Like when you provided the download URL, you should be adding the different links. It makes a lot of sense there. It seems that we can potentially end up with a very big payload, and that is already a problem, I think, for HAL relationships, where we need to be paginating relationships. Maybe we would end up in the same situation.
I didn't know that. Wow.
So yeah, otherwise it could bring your server down. But I don't know. I think that this needs more exploration, and we could be debating this a lot. And I think that since probably Gabe is going to be needing this and working in this, I would just say that if you end up exploring that relationship route in JSON API, we have that abstract layer of abstraction to create fake relationships. Fake relationships, I mean relationships that are not backed by an entity reference field. So you could just use that and have the serializer create an object that resembles an entity. So technically, it may be possible, but until you get to the code. Do you guys feel comfortable moving for the topic?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So Gabe, you mentioned something else. I just forgot. Sorry.
If I did, I've already forgotten what I mentioned.
Okay, it wasn't that important then.
No.
Now, I think that something that still needs attention, I haven't been able to work on that, is yes, normalizing relationships with UUIDs. So we have full support for UUIDs, except for normalization. So when someone sends a payload with references as UUIDs, just like they get references as UUIDs, it's not working. So I think that this is a critical issue that needs to be resolved ASAP. And as soon as I have bandwidth, I have plans to work on that. But if anyone else has the means and the desire to tackle that, I think that it's a place that makes sense to put our efforts in.
I was going to ask the very naive question of doesn't Core already do this? But I think it needs to be implemented in a different way for you.
Yes, because of the non-recursive normalization process that we use, we cannot reuse the serializer that Core comes with. But it shouldn't be that big of a deal. We just need to be careful on not to go nuts and introduce a performance penalty. That's the only gotcha that I see there. But other than that, loading by UUID, it shouldn't be. It's just that we never thought of that when we did it. So much for TDD. I think that's it. Unless anyone else has something else, I've been working on the presentation for DrupalCon, and at some point I may send you a link to review and tell me you're wrong. And then, as part of that, I am planning to do some performance analysis. So if you have ideas or something that you want me to test for you, now it's the time for the requests. See what I did there? Now it's the time for the requests.
I love puns, so thanks for that.
I'm planning on deleting this. I don't know how to delete that from the video. Anyways.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Talk to you in IRC.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.